Hello. Recently it's been rather interesting to look at institutions, particularly modern institutions, governments, companies, even established church. And it seems to me that there are two rather strange phenomena that are going on. The first of them is a thing called reductionism. Now, reductionism is something that's done in science, and I remember teaching applied mathematics, and essentially what the process is that you can gain a lot about a system by reducing the complexity of the system. So, for example, if I throw a ruler into the air, does its trajectory look like? And what you do is you reduce the ruler to its centre of mass. You turn it into a point. And then you can sort of see what the trajectory is. It's a parabola. But that is if you remove things like air resistance and assume that the Earth is, the ground is flat and the gravity is gravitational is constant. There's lots of assumptions. There are lots of reductions. But notice that that's applied mathematics for you. That's physics as well. And in physics also you have this tendency to reduce the number of things regarded as complexities in order to see the simpler system beneath. And that's why you get all this wonderful predictive power of physics. But in some sense, there's a problem with that. And you can sort of see what the problem is. I've been looking at the work of Professor Edward Fieser, I think that's how you pronounce it, who is a remarkable mind, and there's a lovely book called The Last Superstition, and also his introduction to scholastic metaphysics. And if you read both of those, you sort of begin to see that there is a problem with reductionism, reducing things to a smaller part in order to understand it. Once you've done that, you've lost a lot of information. I mean, for example, one of illustration I find quite interesting is, suppose that you're sitting there in your front room, and all of a sudden this rocket materializes, the TARDIS materializes into your living room, and it dematerializes again straight away. Notice there's a problem with that, scientifically. Because if you're the only witness to that, science actually can't say that it's true or not, because it can't repeat the experiment. It can't falsify it either. If you're the only witness, lots of people call you mad because TARDISes don't appear from nowhere. They only seem to appear in BBC productions. So, as far as science will go, the TARDIS didn't happen because of, if you reduce everything to normality, that's not what they do. And so there's a sort of underlying assumptions in in physics that aren't real, that don't describe reality. And that's tricky. They're trying to observe consciousness, for example. Now, say that consciousness is part of brain states, and they define consciousness in a way that it becomes just brain states, because that's all they can observe. It does mean that science is not a complete system of knowledge. You cannot do science coherently without a philosophical framework, and as far as we Christians are concerned, you cannot do science without God. David Hume, the famous Scottish philosopher, tries to separate cause and effect, and so undoes the whole fabric of science itself. So, there seems to be, in many institutions, many ways of thinking, a tendency to reduce the problem. And if everyone starts to think the same way, you start the seeds of what's called groupthink, which is something else. That is the second problem I want to look at. Groupthink is a rather pernicious thing, and it's based on the prisoner's dilemma, essentially, which essentially says that if you have two prisoners who have committed a crime, and they're being interviewed separately, and if they can be, if they're told that if they confess, they'll get a lighter sentence, but if they don't confess, they'll get a harsher one. But if they both do not confess, then they can go scot-free. So the problem it then becomes is, well, should you confess or not, knowing that your comrade in the other room might spill the beans and get a lesser sentence than you. And the result is that both prisoners can spill the beans, both end up with a lighter sentence when they could have gone scot-free. And the same sort of thing is true in groupthink. People don't want to think against the grain. They don't want to think anything that's unacceptable. So if the reduction of reality seems simpler, then anyone who thinks otherwise is seen as being a bit odd, or, as is beginning to be the case, you become really persona non grata. And you'll see groupthink in lots of organisations, where they will say things like, we offer competitive salaries, and you're not allowed and the managers aren't allowed to disagree with that. But the fact is that they don't. Or you have, in a church, you can say, it is better to modernise these doctrines because it will appeal to more people. And so the bishops will go along with that, and they will stay in that mindset whether it's right or wrong. And so you get a whole hive mind thinking you can't possibly penetrate, you can't contradict. And because they are reducing themselves, if you like, the individuals reducing themselves to the higher way of thinking. Now, of course, there might be many who say, well, look at the church, isn't that all churches, isn't the Catholic Church guilty of groupthink? If you're not allowed to, if you challenge the status quo, you're a heretic and you're cast out. That is true. There's that sort of element of that. If you don't believe in the Holy Trinity, then you can't exactly call yourself a Catholic Christian. But there's a big difference between what the church is and what groupthink is. We have the system of doctrine. But there is a fundamental doctrine, a very fundamental doctrine, right at the heart of all of Christianity. And that is, you can't reduce human beings to lumps of earth. God has created every single human being to love and to be loved. He has created every single human being for infinite worth, because he gives worth. And that means that it doesn't matter whether someone is a Catholic or whether they are any form of heretic. It doesn't mean it's whether a different religion. Could even be secular, or even, God forbid, Satanist. It doesn't stop the human being behind all that from being infinitely precious. Of course, human beings fall so very far from God. But look at God. Look at the God who leaves the 99 sheep to go in search of the one that strays. And if the one that strays so far that the other sheep can't be seen, that doesn't matter. When that sheep is brought back, there is rejoicing in heaven. It doesn't matter where that sheep has gone. That human being has so much worth to God, which is why he gives the 2 commandments. Love God, love neighbour, for both are fundamentally precious, and you will not find a being more precious than God, and you will not find a being other than God more precious than another human being. So that is the essence of the church. That is its fundamental objective, to see people, no matter who they are, as being valuable. Now, of course, we can't change the doctrine of the church. That may well be seen as some form of groupthink. But we have reason for believing what we do. Now, what about those in groupthink? Well, there are some organisations that I think when they're challenged, they'll fall over like a pack of cards. And if that's the case, then it's better that they are challenged somehow. And perhaps that's something that Christians need to do, perhaps to gently and lovingly subvert the system. Perhaps not to support a party, but rather to support the truth. To live not by lies, for example. So God bless you. Do not succumb to groupthink, but think for yourself, and be proud to be an individual called by God. See what he says about himself. God bless you in your search for him. God bless you in your reach for Jesus Christ. God bless you because you are so infinitely loved. And please, pray for me.